Hi guys, John Sipes with Cincy Fishing. Sorry it's been a little while since I've been able to make a video. Work's been kind of crazy. I have been out doing a lot of fishing. I've been trying to get a little bit of fishing video footage, but that hasn't worked out just the way I want it. Still looking for a inexpensive video editor so that I can cut out time between the catches. Not necessarily to kind of mislead people and have 3 or 4 days worth of fishing and cram it into one video. Just not how I want to do this channel. But kind of getting back into things, today I want to talk about jigs. Not football jigs, swing jig heads, but regular curly tail jigs thrown on. Like for example this half-ounce ball head jig. I believe this is one of the tricks or techniques that has long been forgotten or not utilized as much. You see I just picked a bright fluorescent green chartreuse color, so it'll kind of stand out for you. Haven't even popped the paint out of the eyelet yet, but this is one of my all-time favorite finesse style techniques. And I'll kind of explain why I think it falls into that finesse category, long before I even knew what finesse fishing was. This is a absolute favorite of mine for deep water smallmouth fishing, walleye fishing, catching stripers. I've caught quite a few other species. I've caught some largies on this, but primarily my technique with this was 2 to 4 pound test line on a spinning rod. Pretty much a light action, something with a lot of parabolic bend. We used to go up to the St. Lawrence River, fish that starting back in like 1981, I believe, 82. We went up there and smallmouth fishing was phenomenal. We fished in anywhere from 2 feet of water all the way up to probably close to 40 feet of water. The water in the St. Lawrence River is ultra clear. That's why we stooped down in the line. I don't think I ever threw anything heavier than 6 pound. Of course, back in that day, primary line of choice was monofilament. Still one of my favorite lines for this. It's to me, it works just as fine as anything else. But let me get at a couple of things that we'll do with the ball head jig and a curly tail. I do have one rigged up that was recently out being used. Pretty big, probably about a 5-inch twister tail. Off the top of my head, I don't recall who manufactures this particular grub. I believe actually when I bought these were unbranded. Bought them out at Dixie Marine during the customer appreciation days. Used to buy these by the bucket load. This was the color of choice in the St. Lawrence River for those big smallmouth. Not necessarily this size. I would just go down to about this size here, different color, different style of bait. But I would throw probably a 3-inch, sometimes even a 2-inch twister on the back of that ball head jig. You can just see this one here has got a little hole in it. It'd be great if you wanted to add a rattle or add some extra scent. I do like the ball tail on the back of it. It gives a little bit of different action off of it. These came out of another unbranded, came out of Wisconsin. I was looking for something in a 4 to 5 inch and a pure white for striper fishing. Found these on eBay. I'm sorry I don't remember the seller. It's been another great curly tail for me. This is off the Berkeley line. I like this in that smoked shad. Been a phenomenal little bait. And then just this one, you can see the color on that. This is originally the way it started. Just kind of shows you how the use that I've had out of that bad boy. This one's been chewed up pretty good. Caught quite a few striper on it, caught quite a few smallies on it. Done really well. Kind of get into the way that I throw these guys. You know, sometimes now, today, I find myself throwing the jig, depending on what the conditions are, like some of the river conditions. I'll throw this. This one actually has a remnant of braid on it. It's fishing in the Miami River around some heavy cover. Also in a spot where we were catching quite a bunch of big flatheads. So I went with the braided line to kind of help with some of that cover. And I also believe braid is a lot more sensitive than a mono. I went direct braid, still on. This one was probably a medium light rod. I like it somewhere around 7 foot. I like to find a rod that's got a nice parabolic bend to it. Again, you know, you're dealing with a single jig hook. This one, you can see the limited amount of space in there. So once you're getting them pinned, you got to have that bend in that rod, just kind of like you do with a treble hook, to keep it from being able to throw that jig out. Believe it or not, a lot of times when you do get them stuck on this, I don't lose a tremendous amount of fish. I will step up the hook. This one I didn't, but it was just what I had. But sometimes I'll step up the hook and find a bigger odd hook on them. You know, something around a 3/0 hook works a lot better with these bigger curly tails. The smaller curly tails, it doesn't make much of a difference. I can rig up one of these guys real quick for you, kind of show you the difference when we're talking about I mean, it makes a huge difference. I'll push that up over that keeper. You know, you got quite a bit more hook that's exposed. I just kind of threw that one on there real quick. Didn't matter what the direction was. There is a proper way to rig them and an improper way to rig them. I found both ways do catch fish. Believe it or not, one way has a different type of swim than the other. I haven't found much of a difference in that. If I'm out fishing open water like I did in the St. Lawrence River, fishing around a lot of the islands, I did go to that light line. 4 pound was probably my favorite. Again, in a mono. Kept it real clear, real light line, catching those big smallmouth. You know, we were catching, primarily fishing for smallmouth. We'd catch smallies up there in the 6-inch size all the way up to 22, 24-inch smallies. You know, sometimes we'd get into a 4 or 6. I believe our biggest smallmouth out of the St. Lawrence at that time was probably close to 8 pounds. Pretty big smallie. A lot of times, with it being clear, if you threw any heavier line out in that deep water from smallmouth, you simply wouldn't get the bite. While I'm kind of talking about that, one of the cool things about that river and the time period that we went primarily the same time every year. It was the 3rd Saturday of the month. That's when bass season would open. Depending on how bad of a winter they had, how harsh of a winter they had, depended on whether or not the bass were spawning, which stage of the spawn they were in. Let's go that route. So if it was a pretty cold winter, but it wasn't really super harsh, and sometimes we'd get up there and a smallmouth would be up around these rock piles, islands if you want to call them. You could look down 10 foot, see all the different pits all around from where they were spawning. Of course, we'd locate some fish, circle back out and around, come back, line up on them, start throwing up as close to the rocks as we could to drag it back through. Being even in 30 feet of water, you could look straight down and see that bed. One of the nice things about this was just a color that we found worked predominantly well up there. This nice bright chartreuse, especially when she's brand new, you could see that really well. So you'd get her on some of them beds. If they were fry garden or garden eggs, you'd hop that jig in there. But it did take long, and them smallmouth would grab it, and they were gone. Primarily two ways that I fish this jig. I swim it, depending on kind of where in the water column the bass are. If I find they're suspended, or they're up eating shad or other bait fish, I like to swim it, variate the speed. I can burn it, or I can kind of slow swim it. The other way is hopping it. I do like to throw this bad boy out, count it down, let it hit the bottom, keep a fairly tight line on it. Sometimes just bounce hop it. Other times I'm reeling it, dragging it across the bottom, then I'll hop it and skip it, make it jump. You kind of give it, the little hop off the bottom type action. I found both ways were really good for the smallmouth. Swimming it, especially up there in New York, you could pick up even a few northern pike, rock bass, ring perch. There was other kinds of fish that would gobble this, even the bigger ones up. We did throw a lot of the 4 and 5 inch, trying to primarily target the bigger bass. Sometimes morning, evening, maybe sometimes early in the morning, we would switch over to a dark blue or a black. Typically that worked well too. Chartreuse was probably the main color, backed up by a white. Those two were the primary targets, or the colors that the bass like to target on. I did go back into a few of the creeks up there fishing for largemouth, and I was throwing a spinnerbait. Had a nice largemouth squirrel on it. Threw back in on the spinnerbait. He went come up after it. Just so happened I reached down, picked up the smallmouth rig that I had. It's probably not the best choice. I threw that in around a dock, and I was able to get one out off a dock. So I wouldn't necessarily not throw these around a dock. Throwing around a dock or around heavy weeds cover, 4-pound test line is probably not the best choice. Anymore, when I do that, I will bump up to 10, 12 pound. Again, I like the mono for that, or straight braid. If I'm in around weeds, and I'm trying to swim this guy, I do like 20-pound braid. I think it does a lot better job getting those fish out, pulling the bait through. If you're getting hung up on weeds, you can give it kind of a quick snap and it'll come out. Again, the rods, 6'6" is probably the shortest I would go, around 7 foot, 7'2". If I'm fishing 1/4 ounce or 1/8 ounce jigs, trying to even go smaller presentation, lighter presentation, I would go to an ultralight setup. I do have a 6'6" ultralight panfish combo that I like. Catch my bluegill crappie on that. I had rigged that up a couple times while we were up there. Again, with 4-pound test line. Sometimes even that I had 2-pound test line on. Firing that jig up along those rock piles with that smaller lead head, bringing it through. Especially when I was just trying to kind of swim it middle column where the bass I found were suspended. That seemed to work really, really well. But I like that light action rod that has a lot of bend in it. And I like a couple of different rods. I don't even remember the brands off the top. I was kind of the hodgepodge fisherman. Had a few different mix-match, different rods and reels at the time. I had a Shimano 3000 series, I believe it was, or 2000 series reel, 7 foot. I think the rod of choice primarily was like a 7'1" rod, spinning rod. 99.99% of the time I threw it on spinning equipment. Like I said, I tie on a 4-pound test. One of the things I liked about that is I could keep my rod tip up a little bit. And as I was dragging it across the bottom, swimming it, I made sure that the rod that I would get was very sensitive, where I could feel them as much as I can. Technology from then to today is absolutely, it's night and day. I still have a lot of those old rods. I still can fish a lot with them. I learned how to detect bites. I learned to watch the line, looking for that little tick in a line. A lot of times with these smallmouth out in 40 feet of water, you're even thinking with a 4 or 5 inch curly tail, you're gonna get more than a little tick. A lot of times it wasn't even as much as of a tick. You had to be line watching, and you had to be tuned in, dialed in on that. And a lot of times it would just be something different. Some of the biggest smallmouth that I caught, it wasn't a tick at all. There was plenty of times when I went out and we'd catch 30-pound limits of smallmouth. Our 5-fish limit. Between me and my dad, we'd have 60 pounds of bass, 50, 60 pounds of bass, of smallmouth in a boat on 10 fish. We were averaging 5 pounds of bass sometimes. Sometimes we'd come back in and, we'd only have 30, 35 pounds of bass. But the key was, and the biggest thing, and I still find that true today, even with fishing these guys for striper, is you have to be dialed in, you have to be paying attention. A lot of times it's not even a tick. You have that tight line, and all of a sudden it'll just barely go limp. Believe me, guys, that's when you're wanting to swing on them and set the hook. Hook sets are free. Missing a fish of a lifetime just because you thought something was different. It could have been a pebble on the bottom or something. That's what you were thinking, and it wasn't. You kick yourself in the butt for not even taking a chance on him. So I never hesitated. But guys, that's pretty much it with the regular curly tail, twister tail jig on a ball head. I have kind of variated some of this out recently, and I'm not really going to go into that today. I wanted to really cover the ball head jig and a twister tail. Like I said, something that I think has been overlooked for a while, but it definitely has its time and its place, and it really can be a big fish catcher. We've got some monster striper, 20-30 pound striper on this. A lot of the striper that I'm catching in this area, in the Cincinnati area, are the 10 to 15 pound class. It's not a bad fish at all. Some of the fish that we were catching up in the St. Lawrence River, as far as walleye, we're catching 10, 15 pound walleye on the same rig. They would just be schooling up there with the smallmouth, chasing the bait fish, chasing a lot of rock bass and ring perch. But anyway, guys, that's it. Thank you for watching. If you like what you're seeing, hit that like button, hit that notification button to be notified when I'm going to be posting more videos. I'm going to try to get back in the swing of things as work permits, and as time permits. I'll keep pulling out videos. If there's anything you'd like to see me cover, or my interpretation or take on it, please let me know in the comments down below. Again, this is my take and my interpretation on a ball head jig with a twister tail. I'm sure there's some other people out there that have fished it different ways. This is just a confidence bait for me, or confidence method for me for fishing this bait. Again, thanks guys.